By God, we're going to get her going now. We got the governor in town here. So Jim and his wife, Ellen, and daughter, Julia, live in Edina. And Jim has 2 older children and 5 grandchildren. Jim is a lawyer with the Minneapolis St. Paul firm of Briggs & Morgan. He is certified by the Minnesota State Bar Association as a real property law specialist. Real property law specialist, that's right here. And concentrates his practice on commercial real estate transactions. He has practiced law for 4.2 years. Right? Typo, I guess it's 42 years, you old coot. Okay, Jim joined City of Lakes in 1999, has been active in all areas of service with the club, and served as club president in 2009-2010. Jim's district level service included past Area 10 assistant governor and district foundation board member, and current member of the district and North Star Youth Exchange Foundation corporate boards. Jim and Ellen attended 6 international conventions and hosted 3 youth exchange students. So it's my pleasure to introduce your governor, Jim Nelson, 5950. Right there he is. Coming out, coming out. You can do this, Jim.
Well, I feel that I can. I thought there weren't going to be no kazoos here. Todd has introduced me 3 or 4 times already, and he gets more excited with each introduction. I don't know. Well, it's great to be here. You know, I met, I had met him before, and I don't know if he remembered, but Abul was we were at a gathering last week, a social gathering at Sandy Schlei's house in Edina, to meet with some Rotarians from Australia, actually, and Abul and I had a nice talk. We hadn't really had a long exchange before. We had a nice talk, 15, 20 minutes, and at the end of the talk, he said, gee, you know, you're much more lively than your picture. And I said, well, thank you, I guess. And then I went back and looked at my official picture, and I said, well, okay, maybe it could use a little beefing up. So I did change it a little bit. But in any event, it is great to be here. I do know a number of you, and of course I know Diane very well. We work together a lot. I have big shoes to fill. I'm not sure I'm filling them, but I'm doing my best anyway. And so today I'd like to talk a little bit about our theme for the year and our Rotary values that we share, and a little bit about my personal life as it relates to Rotary. Gary Wong is our president this year of Rotary International. Gary is a Rotarian from the Rotary Club of Taipei, Taiwan. Gary's background, being of Chinese background, is Confucian. And Gary developed his Rotary theme this year, which is Light Up Rotary, from the Confucian saying that it is better to light a single candle than to sit and curse the darkness. Gary told us at the International Convention that it's so easy to sit back and look at the problems of the world and say there are so many problems of the world, and they seem to get worse every week, don't they? Sit back and look at the problems of the world and say there's nothing I can do, and so we do nothing. But Gary said that was not the Confucian way, and that's not the Rotary way. The Rotary way is that if in the darkness I light a single candle, it creates a small glow. But if you light a second candle, it creates a little bigger glow. And if everyone in the room lights a candle, it creates really quite a glow indeed, such that they may call the fire department here. But if we have 1.2 million or more Rotarians around the world lighting our Rotary light, we do shine a big light on the world. And we shine a light on Rotary as well. When you think about shining a light in the darkness, the light shines out, but the light is also attracts attention to itself. But I want to talk for a minute about the light that we shine on the world. I think of it as the light of hope. That's really the business we're in. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, around the clock. Rotary gives hope to people. And I brought along just a few pictures of what I think are the faces of the hope that we shine on the world. That young man, probably from India, getting a polio drop that will not guarantee him a perfect life, but will protect him from the ravages of polio, which is either death or paralysis or terrible respiratory problems for the rest of his life. I'm sure there are some in the room who have had personal experience with people with polio, as I have. And if you've been watching the PBS show, a wonderful series on the Roosevelts, a couple nights ago, there was a very detailed discussion of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's struggles with polio. And he didn't have it the worst, because he had a lot of money to have people take care of him. But you think about people in India who have nothing and have polio. And that's the kind of hope we're bringing. And think of that. Think of the fact that 30 years ago, worldwide, there were 1,000 new cases every single day. And as of last week, I think the number was 181 worldwide, 181 cases of polio, 80% of which are in Pakistan for reasons which you undoubtedly know. So we are making great progress and sending really great hope and saving hundreds of thousands of lives from polio every single year going forward. Some of you may have heard, and perhaps have you had a talk by Hannah Warren in this club? She's spoken to several clubs, okay. Well, some of you know about Hannah. Hannah was a youth exchange student who went to India for her year when she was in high school, and came back to do her master's degree and decided to do a photographic project in which she would take photographs of garment workers, women making saris, take photographs of the workers in their saris, and found to her dismay that they didn't have any saris to model because they couldn't afford them. They couldn't afford the materials to make them, and they worked on looms that were not theirs. And so they were working for very low wages. Hannah is working with a number of Rotary clubs here and elsewhere, developing a cooperative business where the women would now have a stake, an economic stake in their businesses. He is bringing hope for economic empowerment to women in India. You know that our district has done many wells in Haiti, as well as elsewhere around the world. Well, when our Rotarians were down in Haiti, we learned that another critical need for the future are secondary school buildings. And so we have built 2 secondary school buildings, and there's some of the kids, the faces of hope in Haiti, who are now able to go to high school and get an education, giving them hope for the future. Thank you very much. I didn't think it was that good. This is a more personal picture. This was a picture of a group of Hondurans, and I've been to Honduras twice with Steve Solbrak from the St. Louis Park Rotary Club and other Rotarians from our district, looking at the needs of subsistence farmers in the mountains of western Honduras. I was there in March of 2013 and again in March of 2014. This picture was taken this year as we stood near a relatively clean water source a few miles from the village of the 2 gentlemen on the right. We didn't get to their village this year, but we did get to their village last year and saw the source of their water that they are currently using for their domestic purposes, that hole in the ground. is where they're getting their water. They're taking it in buckets at 5 o'clock in the morning before the water runs out, carrying it to their cabins. They're sharing that water with wild and domestic animals. Needless to say, they have a huge problem with waterborne illness, particularly among the youngsters, and they have a high infant mortality rate. An infant mortality rate like we haven't seen in this country probably for 100 years. That young lady is a little Honduran girl from another village that we visited last year. You know, when I really started thinking about what we were doing down there and the hope that we bring to people like Yvette, this little 6th grader, and her other villages and other people in her village, it really struck me what hope we bring just when we visit people in other countries to find out what their needs are. Now, our water project has been approved, as you may know, from the Rotary Foundation. We're working in partnership with the World Vision, and it's an $800,000 project to bring water to 11 villages such as Yvette's. But when we were down there, we hadn't brought them anything except our presence. We had showed them that we cared enough to find out what their needs were. And these villagers turned out for us and spent the day with us in a number of villages. And in this particular village, both the adults and the kids had made various little gifts for us to take back as mementos. You see me holding something in my hand there, which I'm holding here, that Yvette made with my name on one side and her name on the other side. A precious little memento and a remembrance of the hope that her village had by the fact that we were there. When we were in another village this year, a large group of villagers sat in this hot cinder block building just waiting for us to come. And we were a little bit late, but they waited. And we walked in and they gave us a standing ovation. Again, we hadn't done anything but bring them hope. Just like you stood for me today with hope that I wouldn't take too long this afternoon. A hope that's dashed, unfortunately. And this lady in the blue dress, 80-year-old woman who stood up at the end of one of our meetings, we were all sitting under a tarp. And she got up at the end of our meeting when we were talking about who we were and they were talking about who they were and what their needs were. She got up and said, "For years I've been praying that someone would come and bring clean water for our children." She said, "I think you people are an answer to my prayers." It was a very quiet moment in that crowd. So we do shine light, and you know, I shine the light, I show the pictures of the global projects, but we do things just as dramatic here in our community. When we help kids with scholarships, as your club does, when we help kids with Strive, as we were talking about a little while ago, you think of the hope that kids have that somebody cares enough to come to their school and mentor them and help them get through school and give them the motivation to get through school. I was at the Maple Grove Club about a month ago, and they had 8 Strive kids there, all of whom were like your kids probably, struggling to get through school, needing some help. All 8 of them were going on to secondary or to post-secondary education, all 8 of them. One of the kids who had been struggling ended up her senior year a straight A student. Think of that hope of a better life. The Rotary Strategic Plan is a 3-pronged plan that really ties in with the Light Up Rotary theme, I think. The 3-part plan, and of course there are more specific underneath the rubrics, is to support and strengthen clubs. And if we have strong clubs, we can do the other 2 parts, which is to focus and increase our humanitarian service, and to enhance our public image and awareness of Rotary. And I know we talked at the board this morning before this meeting about what your club is doing to increase your public image and awareness of what Rotary is doing in this community, and I think you are really on the right track with that. But you know what really makes that strategic plan worth pursuing is really the core values that bring us all together today and bring our clubs all together around the world. And I want to talk about those a little bit, and they show up on this graphic also. But I want to start with just a little background on myself to let you know where I'm coming from in my view of our Rotary values. How many here, we do have a four-way test in effect here, how many people here know where Breckenridge, Minnesota is? Not very many. A few. Anybody here from Breckenridge, Minnesota or nearby? No, nobody. Well, for those of you who have no idea where it is, it's a small town, and well, yeah, it is actually. It's 14 miles straight west of Foxhome. You're absolutely right. Does that help? 14 miles straight west of Foxhome? You stole my joke, you know, Dave. It is across the river from Wahpeton, North Dakota. Breckenridge is right on the North Dakota border. And Breckenridge is where I was born and raised. Breckenridge is at the head of the Red River. The Red River of the North starts right there under the bridge between Breckenridge and Wahpeton, at the confluence of the Otter Tail River and the Bois de Sioux River, which flows up from the north. Breckenridge, for those of you people who have lived in Bloomington all your life, is a farming community, and that's what a farm looks like. Breckenridge is actually, although it's a cornfield there, Breckenridge has been taken over by the sugar beet industry. It's very big up there in Breckenridge. I was born many, many years ago in this ancient hospital, which is actually, those of you who are old enough to remember the supermodel Cheryl Tiegs, there are some of you probably in the room who remember Cheryl Tiegs. She was born in that same hospital one day before I was born. And so there's two famous people that were born in that hospital, one of whom has held up a lot better than the other, but we won't go into that. It's a small town, and when that hospital was torn down to make way for a better hospital, the better hospital has since been torn down also, by the way, but it was replaced by a three-story senior apartment that is pictured there, and my mother referred to that as the high-rise. There's downtown Breckenridge, which looks kind of quiet, I know, but there's downtown Breckenridge during rush hour. You can see it picks up quite a bit. But it was a nice small town to grow up in. It was a very nice small town to grow up in, kind of a Mayberry type of a town. And one thing that Breckenridge has in common with Bloomington and Minneapolis and cities actually all over the world is that it does have a Rotary Club. And that's the Rotary Park in Breckenridge, actually. Or to be more specific, that's the Rotary Park shelter. The rest of the park is under the Otter Tail River in the background there. Breckenridge has been hit by pretty severe flooding back in the 90s. You may remember more specifically the Fargo and Grand Forks floods, but Breckenridge was hit with the same issues back then. I was from a family of 5 kids. The cutest one in front there is me, in case you were wondering. To the left is my dad, and I show this picture just because I like to talk about my dad a little bit. My dad was a farmer. I grew up on a farm, I should say. He didn't follow that path as an adult. He grew up on a farm out in South Dakota. His parents were immigrants from Sweden, and he grew up speaking Swedish on the farm. He had to learn English when he went to elementary school because neither of his parents spoke English, excuse me. And but he knew his destiny wasn't on the farm. And he decided to become a lawyer ultimately, and he was a small town lawyer out in Breckenridge. And he paid for his own way, not only through college and law school, but he had to pay his own way through high school. And he had to leave home to go to high school because there were no high schools near the farm where he grew up out in South Dakota. This was in the 19-teens. And, you know, for that reason, education really meant so much to my dad because he had to work so hard for it. And he worked so hard all his life as a small-town lawyer to send all of his kids to education, to college and so forth, which we all did. He was a real leader in our community. He was a county attorney for a number of years. He served in the state legislature here in St. Paul for a number of years, and really was known for his integrity and leadership in the community. And I think it's not at all a coincidence that Dad was a Rotarian. And I didn't think about that much when I was a kid. To me, Rotary was just, you know, we all were home for lunch because it was a small town. Everybody came home and had lunch, including my dad. Except on Thursdays, he was gone every Thursday noon. That was his Rotary day. And that's about as much as I knew about Rotary, and that it was, I had been to a couple of meetings with him, and it was all a bunch of guys sitting around smoking cigarettes, as far as I could tell. So I didn't really know much about Rotary. And I really didn't learn much about Rotary and for many years thereafter because my dad passed away when I was 18 years old. I had just started college. And so I didn't have any contact with Rotary until I was over 50 when I was invited to come to the Minneapolis City of Lakes for a meeting and saw some of my professional colleagues there, and I thought, yeah, that might seem like fun, and so I did join City of Lakes 15 years ago. And, you know, I have to say it really opened up my world in a way that I never thought possible. Although I had a good life and a good professional career, I didn't have the broad view of the world that I have now, and I certainly didn't have the number of friends, both here and around the world, that I have now. I think back to a Rotarian in the Excelsior Rotary Club last year. I was told this when I was at their meeting a couple of months ago. They were talking about what Rotary meant to them, and this veteran Rotarian said, "Rotary made me a better person." And I think that's so true. I think Rotary does make us better people. And the district governor journey is an interesting one. Diane knows this. The people you meet from around the world is really an amazing experience. This gentleman was a district governor in Nepal, is the district governor in Nepal. This gentleman is the district governor in India, which has many district governors. Do you recognize Manju by any chance, Diane? He was a good friend of Chris Holm and worked with Karen Treiber also and a number of people. I don't know if you met him when you were over there. My club has a sister club relationship with a Japanese club, Ibaraki East Club, which developed out of Minneapolis' sister city relationship. And they have come and visited us. We've seen them in conventions, and they've come and visited us a number of times. They were last year in 2010 when my club celebrated its 25th anniversary. And I even went golfing with them. And I have to say that, and they invited us back for their 40th anniversary this February, and I went back. And I was amazed when I went back there, they asked me if I wanted to go golfing with them again. I was amazed because nobody in this country has ever asked me to golf with them a second time. If you've seen me golf, you would understand why. Anyway, so we had a great time, and one of the men in those pictures is from Korea. There was a number of Koreans that came over just to celebrate this Japanese club's 40th anniversary, which is, you know, pretty amazing when you think about what the history of Japan and Korea has been a pretty adversarial one, but it's not and it still is, but it's not at the Rotary level. This Korean in the picture told me he'd been to Japan 32 times, every time on a Rotary project or trip or visit. And this gentleman to my left on this picture, his name is Jorge. He was the president of the Rotary Club of Santa Rosa de Copan last year. And, you know, one of the great things about our contributions to the Rotary Foundation and the Rotary Foundation grant process is that it's a requirement when you're doing a global grant that you have a Rotary Club at the other end making sure the project gets done and gets done right, that the money is spent properly. And so our first trip over there last year was just to make that connection and make sure that there was a club who we could trust, and we sure found that out, that there was a great club down there who was very interested in our project. And we traveled around village to village with these Rotarians, and Jorge was one of them. And we had this meeting, and the picture you see here was their regular Rotary meeting the night before we left back for the United States. At the end of the meeting, we stepped out onto the street and we're giving each other our hugs and handshakes goodbye. And Jorge looked at me and he said through an interpreter, you know, we don't speak the same language, but we share the same values. And I had heard about the Rotary International's statement of our core values, but it never hit me in quite such a personal way as it did that night, that a kid from western Minnesota could be friends with people from western Honduras, despite the lack of a language similarity, that we could connect and be friends. And it's because of the Rotary values. And when I was in Japan, again, we went to lunch at another Rotary club just before I got on the plane to come back here. And I looked at the front of the room, and there was a sign up there, 1, 2, 3, 4. It wasn't in English, it was in Japanese. But I knew exactly what it said, and I'm sure you did too. It's because they share the same values, if not the same language or culture. And what are those values? I don't know if they're up there or not. Yeah. Fellowship. You know, we get together every week. We have lunch or breakfast, and we share that fellowship. Many of us join for the fellowship. Some of us join just for the business networking, and if we do it just for that reason and it doesn't catch fire with us, we're probably not going to stick around very long. But the fellowship makes us stick around. The fellowship, the friendship, the fun, because it should be fun. The leadership is the second one that I want to talk about. We are an organization of business and professional and community leaders, but we're also an organization that trains and helps us develop our leadership skills. And that's particularly important as we bring younger members into our organization, that we get them those leadership skills so they can carry on the mission of Rotary. Integrity, the 4-way test. I don't need to say much about that, but many of our clubs, I don't know if this one does, many of our clubs sponsor ethics programs in the high schools. And we try to live the 4-way test like I think my dad lived the 4-way test. Diversity. I've been to 6 international conventions, as Todd mentioned. And you really see the diversity of Rotary when you go to those in a very stark manner. But with 34,000 clubs, 200 countries, people of all kinds are Rotarians and share the same values. But even within our clubs, we have tremendous diversity of professions and opinions and skills. And that diversity is really the strength of Rotary. And then, of course, finally, there's service, which I think is the first among equals as far as the values are concerned. And you know, when we do things, when we work together in service, that really deepens our fellowship. All these values really come together and work together. Our service deepens our fellowship, and we come together in our fellowship, that enhances our service opportunities. Our leadership, we use our leadership skills in the advancement of service. So these are the values that really make me proud to be a Rotarian. And I hope they make you proud to be a Rotarian. And they really define, I think, the kind of people we want to bring into Rotary to carry on the Rotary light into the next generation. I usually stop here and talk a little bit about foundation, because I like to urge people to join in with their fellow Rotarians and contribute. I don't have to talk to this club about that because you're already doing it. You've got about 100% participation in the Rotary Foundation, and I'm very proud of what this club does for the foundation. So I'm not even going to say any more about that. Thank you, and let's keep it up. And finally, I'll just close by saying, and talking about lighting up Rotary, I mean, we do need to pass that light on to future generations of people. My mother outlived my dad by 42 years. My dad was pretty young when he died, and my mother was even younger. And she lived in the same house until she was well into her 80s, same house we grew up in. And when she died, she went through a kind of a typical process of selling the house, and then she moved into an independent apartment, and then she broke her hip and had to move into assisted living, and on until she was in a nursing home with one room left. And little of tangible worth but the clothes on her back. But she did have a box of her personal memorabilia with photographs and the family Bible and a few things like that stuck in there. And when we cleaned out her room, we cleaned out that little box, and at the bottom of that little box, I found my dad's Rotary pin that she'd kept for 46 years, I think, or 48 years. And that really struck me, and that's when I really started thinking about my dad and his connection to Rotary and the four-way test and his leadership and his integrity. And that really sparked yet another flame in me for Rotary and how he passed his values on to us. And that's what we need to do for the next generation. Let's bring those people who share our values into Rotary. Let's light the Rotary flame for them. Let's light up Rotary and keep it lit for many generations to come. So thank you very much for listening to me.